So welcome everyone to the beginner's guide of Pentest, right? And today we'll be discussing about few more topics. Okay, so continuing with the very first one. Okay, it's your social engineering attacks. So social engineering is the art of manipulating people so they give up confidential information, right? So the types of information pen tester or an attacker, right? Here attacker and pen tester will be on the same level, isn't it? Throughout the whole case. As a social engineering attack, he's also doing attacks, right? So he'll be behaving like an attacker here. So let's say if we are doing the black box testing, remember from the last session. So as a black box testing, it's important for you to do what? To do the social engineering, isn't it? So that you can gain more and more access to the network. Rather than, if you talk about white box or the gray box, they already have some information, isn't it? But for a black box, social engineering attack can be quite useful for them. And moreover, we also discussed this in planning and scoping that whether social engineering attacks is allowed or not, right? Remember these things? Perfect. So here, pen tester and attacker, they both are the same thing for now. So I'll be relating sometime with the word attacker or with a pen tester. So the types of information pen tester or an attacker are seeking can vary. Okay. But when individuals are targeted, the attacker are usually trying to trick you into giving them your passwords or company information or access your computer to secretly install malicious software, right? That will be doing what? That will give them access to your passwords and you can say bank informations, and moreover, if we talk about company, it will be giving you the company information to the attacker, right? And moreover, they can also take the control over your computer if they were able to install those malwares through which they were able to take the control of your computer. Then they can take out several information out of it, isn't it? Right? And we call it term as CNC if they are able to command and control your whole systems and everything, right? And from one computer, what they can do, they can go for the other computer as well, and they can create a chain out of it. Make sense? So if you are creating many bots, so that's known as your botnet, right? The combination of many bots is known as your botnet. So what we do, we use social engineering tactics because it is usually easier to exploit your natural inclination to trust than it is to discover ways to hack software, right? For example, if I say, it is much easier to fool someone into giving you their password than it is for you to try hacking their password, unless the password is really weak, right? So that's why social engineering tactics are pretty much easier, and they usually go for this way, because rather than cracking out the password of your system, it can take a lot of efforts and a lot of tools and many more things. It will be very time consuming. But if you talk about social engineering, it's pretty much getting the trust and fooling the people, playing with their mind and taking out the password from them. So that's why, as Atharva said, and human vulnerability can never be paired. That's why, in company and an organization, what they do, they train you regarding these things, regarding the social engineering attacks. They set up these policies. They make you do good practices. So we'll talk about them later on also. Okay, clear till this point regarding social engineering attacks? So now we'll be doing what? We'll be discussing about more social engineering attacks here, right? So we'll be discussing now few more different types as well. So what we'll be doing, we'll be making urgency. Nice one, Mr. Sanjay. Oh, good one, good one. So what we'll be doing, I'll be showing couple of slides here, right? Moving on, the next one, if we talk about the social engineering attacks, the very first one, guys, is your phishing. So what's a phishing? So phishing, guys, is a cybercrime in which a target or targets are contacted by email, right? Or you can say telephone or text message as well, by someone posing as a legitimate, if you can say institution, to lure individuals into providing sensitive data such as their PII. PII is in personally identifiable information, like their email IDs, mobile number, their social security number, and all those things which are their personal ones, and like their banking, their credit card details and passwords. So that's your phishing, right? You might have encountered these things a lot in your email accounts. You get well structured email, I would say, isn't it? You get a very well structured email in which they will be providing a fake URL, not fake URL, we'll be calling it as a malicious URL, right? So the whole mail will be constructed in a very proper manner. Even, you know, guys, you can do what, you can fake an email ID also. Like, if I am here, I can send Mr. Loknath an email, and I can set my email ID as the one of Sanjay Kumar Nath, right? I can, you know, use his email ID. So if somehow, if I'm able to, you know, let's say let me just write it up. So let's say if I am trying to, you know, mail, or if my the target is Mr. Loknath. Okay, if my target is Mr. Loknath, then if I want to fish him right now, if I want to do the phishing social media attack, so see, if I am gonna send him the email normally in a more genuine way, what happens, it will be sending my email ID, right? For example, it will be something like, you know, sayim at the rate something something .com, right? The original one. Generally this happens with everyone, right? Absolutely. So what I can do, I can fake my email ID as well. I can do what, I can send Mr. Loknath an email, you know, by like, let's say he works in our organization with the name abc.com. Okay, so let's say ABC is the name of this organization. This is the URL, or so you can say the domain name. And let's say in this organization, they have an email ID with the name hr@abc.com. Okay, so what I can do, guys, I can send an email to Mr. Lokesh with this email ID, and I can structure a proper email, a more genuine looking one, and I can do what? I can attach a malicious URL in that email. So with, if we talk about Mr. Loknath's perspective, right? So he'll be doing what? He'll be thinking, okay, this, he will be checking who sent me the email, right? So he'll be checking the email ID, it's from hr@abc.com. So he'll be saying, okay, this is from my organizations only, so this mail has been sent by my HR. So, you know, he will be trusting that email, and he'll be just quickly clicking on that URL, and as soon as he click on that URL, my job is done here, right? Does this make sense, the whole example? Okay, so moving on, if we talk about, you know, phishing and everything, right? So we have different types of it. So if we talk about another one, which is your smishing. So what's an smishing? So smishing is a phishing scam conducted by your SMS as in your short message service, right? So we have these crafty fishers. They send text messages that appear from trusted senders such as, you know, banks and online retailers. You might have seen like you get plenty of messages right away, and if you check at the top where the name is mentioned, sometimes the bank name is there, right? So normal person will be like, you know, easily fooled by this thing, right? You might have seen these scenarios a lot with your mobile. You got a SMS there. In that SMS, what is there? The title, or, you know, the name where it is mentioned at the top, if you can see something here. So they will be mentioning that company name or that bank name, so that the user can easily trust this message, and he can easily click on the, you know, message, right? And moreover, what they also say, they'll be sending you something like, you know, so you want the lottery, so you want a prize, so if you want to avail or, you know, redeem your prize, just click on this link, hurry up, and all these things, right? So that's your smishing. Perfect. Then we have wishing. What's wishing, guys? So wishing, it's a combination, you know, of voice and phishing. It's a telephone version of phishing, you can say, right? So this technique, it uses, you know, a spoofed caller ID that can make attacks look like they originate from a known number, right? You might have seen and encountered this as, you know, this thing is as well a lot of times. Even I have been, you know, seen this phishing a lot with me. I got a plenty of calls regarding, so your, you know, your account number will be get blocked, or your account will get blocked if you don't update your this card numbers and everything. So they will be asking you, you know, they will be first of all, you know, gathering some information regarding you, and they will be asking you regarding some card details, like general, like of social security number. If you talk about Indians, the Aadhaar card details which are linked up with your bank account. So they will be asking you about those things. So You will be providing them, and slowly they will be, taking you to the OTP part. So they'll be saying, okay, sir, we got each and everything, every information from you. For the confirmation and to continue your account, all we need is we'll be sending you a confirmation OTP, and you have to send us that OTP. You have to tell us that OTP over the call, right? So that's what happens with the wishing part, doesn't it? So as soon as you provide them the OTP, within a second, there will be a transaction from your account, and you are the victim now of this wishing attack. Getting my point regarding what's wishing? Perfect. Moreover, if you talk about, phishing, there is one movie in the Netflix. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. That goes by the name Jamtara. It's a pretty good one regarding all this phishing scenarios. So it's a pretty good one. If you guys want to look, you can always look for it. I'm just dropping the name. Great. Moving on to the next social engineering attack, which is your spear phishing. What's a spear phishing, guys? So spear phishing is a social engineering attack in which a perpetrator or an attacker, what he does, he disguises as a trusted individual. He tricks the target into clicking a link in a spoofed email or any text message or instant messages. So basically, when your target is a normal individual, we call it as a spear phishing. Yes, Bhanu Pratap, absolutely. When you are targeting any employee of an organization or something like that, or if you're targeting a group of people, that's your, spear phishing. Then we have whaling. What's whaling? A cyber attack targeting a high profile executive with access to financial or sensitive data, right? So whaling, it also uses, deceptive email messages targeting high level decision makers within an organization, such as as you mentioned, CEO, CFOs, and other executives, right? So for example, an attacker may send an email to a CEO requesting payment and pretending to be a client of the company, right? That's your whaling, targeting the big fish here. Clear? Moving on to the next one, which is pretty common, and I have seen everyone, telling me about this, which is your shoulder surfing. So what's a shoulder surfing, guys? So shoulder surfing, it refers to the act of obtaining personal or private information through direct observation, we can say, right? So it involves looking over a person's shoulder to gather particular information while the victim is, oblivious. Oblivious as in not aware of or concerned about what is happening around him, doesn't it? So you might have seen in ATM also, it's like, genuine nature. I don't know about you guys, but it's with me also, like, I just have to look what that person is doing, something like that, right? It's normal and human nature as well. So it's not like I'm, checking their password, or I want to know what's the password of their PIN or something like that. But just a nature, and you are just looking at that thing and like you to know what that person is doing, right? And moreover, common example, as you guys have also mentioned, in exam, let's say it's the last hour, right, of the exam submission, and you are gonna fail. So what do? You quickly, you do the shoulder surfing there. You cheat from the first bench. You'll be just doing what you'll be saying the whatsoever he's writing in his answer sheet, doesn't it? I don't know about you guys, but I have done that lot, right? So that's your shoulder surfing. So we won't call it like, cheating nowadays. Okay, from now on, we won't call it cheating. We'll call it as a shoulder surfing. We'll be giving a pretty good term for that. Moving on with the next one, which is your word, which is your dumpster diving. What's dumpster diving, guys? So if you go by the definition, dumpster diving is a security threat that's every bit as a real as that posed by online hackers. It is something which is failing to protect one's business from those who would exploit the information available in the trash, and thus it invites victimization by cyber criminals. Right? So as you mentioned, like, what you do, guys, yeah, like if you receive a parcel or something from an Amazon, what do you guys do generally? You take out your item and you throw that, box or the wrapper into the dustbin, into your trash, isn't it? So if you guys notice, there is a bill attached to that wrapper. Ever notice that thing? There is a bill which is attached to that box, isn't it? So that thing can be pretty much useful for another person, doesn't it? It can be like, it holds a lot of details regarding you, a lot of information regarding your individual person, right? So that's your dumpster diving, right? We generally vet those bills. Yes, Atharva, great, good job. In moreover, if you guys know, in organization also, what they ask you to do, they ask you to, shred those documents before dumping them. Anyone in whose organization or whose company this thing is like, being followed? So they ask you, they have this policy and they say, okay, before dumping your these, documents which you have used for any business deal or for that matter or any project regarding that thing. So there is always a shredder for that. Whenever the document is of no use, you have to, put those documents in a shredder and, so that an attacker or any other person cannot take advantage out of this thing. Got it? What's the dumpster diving? Perfect. Moving on with the other one, we have piggybacking. What's piggybacking? See, yes, guys, that's what my question is, Atharva. Like, what can be the difference between piggybacking and tailgating, man? Though generally they are called, sometimes and many places you will be finding, okay, piggybacking and tailgating is same, right? So many times people call it same, but piggybacking is when an unauthorized person follows an authorized person into a secure or restricted area with the consent of the authorized person. Okay. That authorized person may intentionally or unintentionally allows an unauthorized person to pass through a secure door. For example, if you're saying, I forgot my ID badge at home, please help me. And that person will be opening that door for you. If you can look at the, in the picture, right? But if we talk about tailgating, right? If we talk about tailgating, what we are doing, tailgating is when an unauthorized person follows an authorized person into a secure or restricted area without the consent of the authorized person. So he sneaks into the organization without the awareness of anyone within the organization. Clear with this? So consent is the key factor here. All right. Consent is the key factor here, which is playing around and differentiating between tailgating and your piggybacking. Got it, everyone? Moving on with another one, social engineering attack. It's your diversion theft. What do you understand by diversion theft? So diversion theft is, the attacker, what he does, he tricks a person responsible for making a genuine delivery into delivering that, that consignment to a location other than the intended location. Okay. And then he can do what? He can replace these things. Does that make sense? So in diversion theft, what is happening? Let's say, there is a genuine delivery guy who is delivering a consignment to a location. Okay, so what you can do, you can play around with that delivery guy mind, and you can, ask him, and you can manipulate his mind to, and and you can agree that guy, okay, this is not the location where you have to drop your parcel or your consignment. You will make him, to deliver into new location from where you can take that parcel and take an advantage out of it. Got it? Like, you might have, if you take a very layman example for that, you might have seen, regarding this pizza delivery and everything from the Domino's. So that was a policy like 30 minutes free, something like that, right? If your pizza is not delivered within 30 minutes, it will be free for you, right? That was a policy before for the Domino's one, isn't it? That 30-minute policy. If you don't get the pizza within 30 minutes, it will be free for you. So what people were doing, if you guys have heard about it, people were doing what? They came to the streets, okay, and they were doing what? They will be telling that Domino delivery guy, okay, this address is not here, this person will be there. So you are just confused. Just go left and then right, take a straight, and you'll be finding that particular location there. Got it now? So we can move further. So the next one is your what? It's your honey trap. What do you understand by honey trap? So what you do, you target a person inside the company online. Okay, you target the person inside the company, you target him online, pretending to be an attractive person here. Okay, then you do what? Then you begin a fake online relationship to obtain confidential information about the target company. Got it now, everyone? What's the honey trap? Perfect. Moving on, the next one is your eavesdropping. What's eavesdropping? So guys, an eavesdropping attack occurs when a hacker intercepts or deletes or modifies data that is transmitted between two devices, right? Or like moreover, you are listening something in between. Let's say you are standing in a park, and two guys are doing the conversation, and you are sitting here and you are just listening that information, right? That's also an eavesdropping, correct? So this is also known as your sniffing, which relies on unsecured network communication. Yes, man-in-the-middle attack, right? To access data in transit between those devices, right? So since we brought up this term, okay, what's sniffing? So you guys remember, like old times, you guys must have seen this in movies or in your real life also. Like a guy is climbing up into the post that where your telephone wires are connected, right? And then what they do, they put their device in between, and then to check the line. But more than that, what they were able to do, first of all, they were able to figure out the issues, and moreover, what they were able to tap your whole line, right? So if there is any sort of a communication going on, they were able to hear that thing as well. Make sense? Perfect. So that thing spatially is known as your what? That thing is known as your, you can say, wiretapping also, wasn't it? Telephone tapping, wire tapping, that's the same thing. So sniffing is something like that only, right? In this, you capture all those data, you analyze those data here for that matter, right? And you try to gather more and more information out of it. Clear with this? So guys, when we talk about sniffing, passive sniffing is there, and your active sniffing is there, isn't it? So guys, when we talk about passive sniffing, okay, we moreover deal here with hubs. Okay, everyone know what is a hub? What is a hub? And in active, we deal with more with your switch also. Just for now, giving this example. So in hub, many people call it as a dumb device or not so smart device. So if we talk about the functionality of an hub, what it does, it broadcasts, right? It broadcasts all your data, isn't it? Perfect. So what, just giving an example of regarding hub, this is something your hub is, right? Let's say these are the four, devices connected to this particular hub. So let's say this is A, B, C, and let's call it H. H as in, we can say a hacker or any part of it. Perfect. So if A wants to send any sort of data to C, so what will happen with that? It will be going to your B as well. It will be going to your C as well, and it will be going to your H as well, isn't it? Right? This is what happens. Perfect. So, but moreover, what happens? H and B will not receive that packet or that data because their NIC, which is a network interface card, is set up in such a way that these are already, in their managed mode. So they will just check, okay, this data packet does not belongs to us. So they will just reject that data. Although the data is being, delivered to these both ports as well, but still they won't accept it. Okay, and if that data went to C will be checking, okay, this data's address belongs to me and it is mine, so he will easily accept that particular data and he will be able to see it. But sniffing, if we talk about passive sniffing, what happens is we have this Wireshark utility and WinPCAP. So what they do, they change over this particular NIC port, right? This port, which is in your managed mode by default. Absolutely. Which is by default in your managed mode. It changed this from managed mode to your what? To your promiscuous mode. Okay, promiscuous mode, you can say like a god mode here. With this, you will be able to receive that data which you are already seeing, right? And moreover, you can accept it and you can analyze that data which is being circulated in the hub. Got it? Perfect. So just a remediation for that, or you can say mitigation for this thing was your switches, but still in switches, many more attacks were there because attackers are not gonna stop at this particular point, isn't it? There are plenty of more things. So with Switch, many more things came into the picture, but that's another part of the story. I was just, giving you an idea regarding these things, what is sniffing and everything. I hope it's clear to everyone. Moving on to the next, social engine attack, which is your elicitation. What's elicitation, guys? So this is the strategic use of casual conversation here. Okay, it is a strategic use of casual conversation to extract information from people, or you can say your targets, without giving them the feeling that they are being interrogated or pressed for the information. Okay, these attacks can be simple or involve complex cover stories and planning. So just a normal conversation, the casual conversation is going on, and meanwhile you are asking some sort of a question and answer there by gaining the trust and everything. Yes. So you usually use a series of questions to get employees to tell you valuable or any sensitive information here. Okay, and if you are able to compromise, let's say, one email account, then you can elicit more information from other employees by acting like that person, doesn't it? So let's say if you are able to get hands on manager's email account, so you'll be sending to the lower ones, okay, this is your boss and I need you to send me the quarterly financials and all those bits, right? So obviously that person to whom you mailed, he'll be giving all those information to you, right? Moving on to the next one, which is your interrogation, right? It is generally interviews used by your law informants or military or intelligence agencies. Your pen testers won't generally use this technique. Okay, it's just part of the social engineering attack, but generally pen tester does not use this technique, right? I guess interrogation is pretty clear to each and everyone. So these are the interviews used by informants used by a law enforcement, military, or intelligence agencies, right? Moving on to the next one is your impersonation. What do you understand by impersonation? So it is an act of pretending to be someone else in order to gain access or gather information, right? So that's your impersonation. Moving on to the next one is your USB key drop. What do you understand by USB key drop? So pen tester, what they do, or any attacker, what he will do, they will be loading up their USB with malware for it, like the many backdoors or a keylogger here. So they will be doing what? They will be dropping the USB drive in the parking lot. Okay, for example, they are dropping that USB drive in the parking lot near the organization. And as a human tendency, human nature, they will be doing what? They will be picking up your USB, and with all that curious mind, he will be trying to, check what is inside that USB. Am I right? Isn't it? So what he will be doing, he'll be that person, or you can say, you drop this USB in a parking lot of an organization. You loaded it with some malicious script. You can say a backdoor. You installed a Trojan, for instance, or any keylogger. You install all these things in your USB drive, and you dropped in a parking lot. So there will be a employee, right? Chances will be there that employee will be picking up that USB from a parking lot. He'll be going into his office. He'll be sitting in his chair in his cabin, and with a curious mind, he'll be trying to do what? He'll be trying to check, okay, what is inside this particular USB drive. So he'll be doing what now? He'll be inserting that USB drive into his system, right? And he'll be trying to see what is inside that file or something folder. So as soon as he copies them into the system, your work is done, right? And now you are able to, if you have set up a backdoor entry, if you've set up any Trojan, you can take an access of that system now. Getting my point? Like how to utilize USB key drop. Clear with this USB key drop, everyone? Moving on to the next one. Next one is your authority. What do you understand by authority here? See, people are more willing to comply with a request when they think it is coming from someone in authority, right? Let's say from a CEO or manager, isn't it? You'll be trusting that particular person, or any important client is there, or any government agency is there, or any financial institution is there, isn't it? So what you do, you take advantage out of this, or you take the authority, or you use authority of another person over here. Just a quick example regarding this thing. One, let's say you there is a highway. You guys are driving in a highway. Okay, you're driving in a highway, and what happens now? That highway has a limit. Okay, you're driving in your highway. You're driving in a car, for that matter, and you have family with you. Okay, and it's like a, you can say, situation based. Someone is very sick and you are rushing to the hospital now. Okay, and that highway, and you're cruising at the speed of, let's say, 120 kilometers per hour, and the limit of the speed of that highway is somewhere around 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. So what happened now? You saw a guy and he's stopping you. You saw a patrolling car just near to you, let's say about 20 to 30 meters. Okay, and you see that guy, he stopped you there. Now what happened? The guy who stopped you is wearing casual dress. Okay, he is wearing casual dress and says that you were over speeding, due to which you have to give a penalty. What would you do in that situation? Will you give the penalty? Like he's saying in this situation, he's saying, okay, I will not book you in any particular, pages and something like that. I won't give you the ticket. Just give me money and I'm cool with it. Okay. So you say asking for identity and authority, perfect. So I'm assuming you won't give the, that money to him, which he's asking for, right? Now, if I say, if just trying to, remind you the scenario. Someone is there back in your car, from your family, he's very sick. You urgently know, you need to rush to the hospital. And a person who's standing just in front of you in a casual dress, he's asking you to give the, amount of money, considering there's a patrolling car just right next to you, like, 20, 30 meters. So now what happens is, if you say no, okay, as he seems to be a normal guy. Now, what if that guy says that he's a police officer, and if you don't pay him, he will go to his car and he will get his, that penalty book or challan book, you can say, and book a challan of you. Okay. And if you don't pay him, he will take his car, he will take your car, and he can take your car away, and he will be saying, okay, you can get your car after going all those processes from the court and everything, and you have to pay, a more amount of money for this thing. Now, what will you do? Would you take that risk now, considering that someone is, very sick in your family, who is sitting in your car, and you have to immediately go to the, hospital, and that person is asking for a very small amount of money, you can say, okay. But since you are saying, okay, he's in casual dress, you'll be asking for, authority and everything, identity and everything. But now he's doing what? He's using authority of that another person, someone who is sitting in the patrolling car, isn't it? So he's using his authority and he's saying, okay, I'm the police officer. If you don't pay me, I'll be going to my car. I'll be grabbing that challan book right away, and I'll be, booking a challan of you. So moreover, what I will do after booking a challan of you, I will be taking your car. I'll be taking your car to the station. Now you can do what? You have to, pay for your challan, pay for your ticket, and you can go to all those court processes. You can, and then you can take your car back. Now, are you gonna take that risk, or will you just give him a small amount of money, like, small box of money, rather than giving a huge amount of penalty and going through all these processes, and considering that someone is in your car who is very sick and immediately wants to take to the hospital? What will you do now? Come on, will you take the risk now, or will you just give them money? I'm getting tricky. Yes, that's why I said, using authority and, situation based one. Many of you might say, they'll be giving the money, and many of you say, okay, they won't give the money. But that's another part of the story, right? But moreover, I'm trying to say you that person is using the authority principle here. That guy is using authority principle, right? So rather than going all this, whole process, station, court, and everything, you might give him the money, if you small amount of money if he's talking about, right? You can take that chances, because small amount of money won't harm you anyway, doesn't it? Getting my point, everyone? How to use the authority? What does it mean in social engineering attacks? Clear? Moving on to the next one. Next one is your urgency. What do you understand by urgency? See, guys, human, they want to please others by nature, isn't it? We want to be helpful, right? So here you do what? You take an advantage of that nature. You set up a situation like that. For example, you say, I only have a few minutes before a big presentation. Can you print this for me? Right? So you take an advantage of this one. You can provide the malicious USB here, and when that person use your USB in a system and copy your files, you will get the control, right? Getting my point? Great. Moving on to the next one, which is your social proof. What do you understand by social proof now? So, social engineering through Facebook or Twitter can be very helpful here, or you can say very useful, isn't it? Like, if we talk about social proof, first of all, what do you understand by social proof, guys? If I say I found this blog page or this any page or any website, and if I want to, see the genuineness of it, like if I say, like, if I want to trust that particular website or that blog page, how can I trust? Like, what do you guys see in that thing first? Like, if you're following any page or something like that, any meme page for that matter, or any particular page in Instagram, in Twitter, and any website which you're following, any blogs, what do you see very first thing? Do you see number of followers there? Do you see number of likes there? Do you see number of shares also? Right? So can we say these likes, these shares are your social proof? Like if we have lots of likes or shares, can we add them to your social proof? Yes, right? So let's say, there was this page started by me, let's say by me, okay, and I was doing what? In starting, I was putting, I was uploading genuine things there, like very interesting and very genuine things. Let's say I, upload blogs. So very genuinely, I started doing it. Okay, I can purchase likes also, as you guys mentioned, I can purchase the followers, number of followers also, I can increase it. So for others, it will be working like a social proof. So they'll doing what? Yes, flag. So they'll be doing what? They'll be, okay, they'll be saying, okay, he got many followers. So it might be very interesting. So let's follow it. And they will be checking a number of likes also. It's pretty much high. Number of shares also good. They'll start following you because we crave for social group interaction, right? And we have a need to be included, isn't it? That's a normal human tendency. Am I right? We crave for social group interaction, isn't it? Are you getting my point, guys? Perfect. So as an attacker or pen tester, you can take an advantage of this, by using your own page. And let's say one fine day after gaining the trust and likes, okay, you can, use the malicious links there, isn't it? And people will be trusting you because they know, okay, they are already accessing your websites, your web page, right? And they know, okay, this is a genuine person. He's always, pasting the genuine links and everything. But one fine day when you gained a lot of likes, lot of trust, you have a lot of followers, and you have this, if you want to exploit it now, you want to take an advantage out of it, you can easily place a malicious link there, right? And they'll be trusting you because you have already built that trust with them. So they'll be trusting you, and you will be taking advantage of that time, right? Got it with the social proof thing? Perfect. Moving on to the next one, which is your scarcity. What do you understand by scarcity? So in short, what are you trying to say? You are implementing a technique that works well, to get people to act fast, right? Like sign up now for a special offer. Supplies are very limited, something like that. 30 hours remaining for that, something like that, number of seats, as you mentioned, limited number of seats, join immediately, right? So scarcity is what? It's a shortage. So you're playing, with this thing so that people will act fast. Perfect. Moving on to the next one is your likability. What's likability? See, here the keyword I would say, getting friendly and likable is the keyword here, right? So, you interact with people. Yeah. If you have this aura, very, good charm, you find a common ground, and share some same interest with that other person. Let's say if you're in an organization, right, in a company, what are you doing? What? Like you are doing what? You are setting a common ground there. You are, interacting with the people. You are behaving very, friendly. You are trying to do what? You are trying to gain their trust in this part, right? You are trying to gain their trust. You share the same ground. You say, you'll be talking them with their comfort level. You will talking about, the same mentality, but what is their interest and what is not. So you'll be not talking to them according to that thing, and you are trying to become their friend, a close friend, you can say, right? And you are, being a likable person in that environment, so that everyone will be trusting you, right? Everyone will be, be a friend of you, right? And they'll be start trusting you. They don't think, okay, this person can harm us anyway, because they won't even get this thought, right? So you are being very likable in this section. And out of this, what you can do, you gain their trust, right? And people will want to help you. So you'll be setting up a situation like that where you need their help, or for that matter, they can even give the access to the email account or something like that. Or they will be trusting you so much that they will be giving you, their own account name and password and everything for that matter. So that's your likability, how you use likability as for your social engineering attacks. Clear with this one? Moving on to the next one is your fear. So how can you use fear as an, advantage and do the social engineering attack out of it? So you'll be, displaying something message like this. Your computer has been logged, right? And you have to do this to get this thing, isn't it? So this is done a lot nowadays. If you guys are very active regarding, the news and everything, ransomware attack are, pretty much common nowadays, right? So they'll be displaying you such messages, and then you do what? They'll be telling you, okay, your system got affected. So they'll be asking, for something in exchange, doesn't it? So you'll be giving those things to unlock your system and, to make everything clear. So that's thing, you can take an advantage out of it. So that's your fear thing. Moreover, a lot of companies also do these sort of scams also. You might know about this thing, they display this screen in the, in the system whenever a person is trying to open a website. They display something like this, a warning message or something which is giving them fear that your computer has been logged, or system has a lot of viruses, something like that. So they will be, you'll be offering them, okay, let us troubleshoot this for you, and they'll be, agreeing with you. And when they agree with you, they'll be giving you some credentials, or moreover, you can take the access of that system by, RDP or anything. So you took the control of their system, and now you are trying to troubleshoot. But meanwhile, you are pretending to do the troubleshoot, but moreover, you are trying to access more and more information out of the system, right? Clear with the fear, guys? Like how we can take the advantage of fear. Next is something which we talk about in comparison to physical security or taking advantage of this. So the next one is of fence jumping. What do you understand by fence jumping? So since fences, they provide a physical security boundary for the organization. So as a pen tester also, you can go over or under a fence to avoid a checkpoint, you can say, and take an advantage out of it. Let's say you were able to surpass the any fences and everything, and you were able to enter into the organization, and you connected with the internal network somehow, and then you can perform all those scans and everything which you want to do. Got it? Perfect. So, you are going over the fences and everything, and to get the access out of it. Moving on to the next one is your lock picking. What do you understand by lock picking? This may sound strange, guys, but still, these are the skills required by your pen tester. Many areas that the pen tester needs access to are locked. So learning lock picking is a valuable skill for a pen tester to focus on physical security and to break it. Okay, moving on to the next one is your what is your log bypass. What do you understand by log bypass? Pen tester could also jam a lock or bypass it by manipulating the locking function, right? That's what you're suggesting. So stopping a door from being shut fully by inserting a spacer or a wedge can also be a technique to bypass a lock, because if you don't have the key or something like that, so what you will do, you'll just place a wedge or a spacer in between the lock so that that door never closes. So let's say if any authorized person open that door, okay, and you don't have the key, but you also want to enter that particular room, and to see what is inside that. And so what you'll do, you'll just place a wedge or something in between so that it never gets closed, and you can open it anytime, anywhere you want it to, right? So that's your lock bypass for this one. Here, then we have your badge cloner. What do you understand by badge cloner, guys? So identification badges are required by many organizations, correct? So what you can do, you can snap a photo using a digital camera or reproduce a security badge, right? And you can take an advantage out of it. So if you were able to grab a photo of a security badge, you can just clone it, you can create a new out of it, and if there's any security guard or something like that, you can just show it and you can bypass it. But it works visually but won't make it up past a reader, right? Until unless it's your RFID badges or something like that, correct? So that's your badge cloner. The next one is your quid pro quo. What do you understand by that? Quid pro quo. So attackers, what they do, they call numerous random numbers within a company, okay, claiming to be a from technical support. Okay, somehow they were able to grab many more numbers within a company, and they were calling each and every number, claiming that the attacker or the pen tester is from a technical support. So they offer their service to end user in exchange of, or in exchange for confidential data or login credentials. So they will say, okay, we are from technical support. We want, we got this order. We need to check your system. But to check that system, what you need to do, you have to give me the credentials so that I can have the access of your system. And, just convincing that end user or the person on the other side of the phone, or for example, with the picture, and, you took the confidential data out of him or her or the login credential, and you're easily able to access the whole system now. Clear with the quid pro quo? Great. And lastly, the last one, which is with your social engine attacks, is your pop-up windows. So what do you understand by pop-up windows as a social engine attack here? So windows that pop up, while surfing the internet and ask for user information to log in or sign in. So you are accessing any web page and all of a sudden you get a pop-up where he's asking you a username and password. You are trusting that website and you enter your username and password, but that password and username will be going to the another person, which is behind all that attacks. So that's how you use pop-up windows also. Clear with the pop-up windows on all those social engineering attacks, everyone? So we'll be talking about, guys, since I told you, we'll be going with a few Linux basics one. All right. Since we are talking about the few basic commands out here, we'll be going with these ones. That's absolutely fine. Perfect. So if we talk about ifconfig, guys, what does ifconfig do? So it's like an IP config in your Windows one, right? So it will be listing the interfaces, and moreover, just to give a broader idea, it will be IP. In short, we can say it will be giving you the IP also, right? IP, MAC, and all those statistics regarding your network device, correct? Perfect. Then we have CD. CD is for what? Stands for change directory. Correct. So whenever guys you want to move from one directory to another, we use CD for that matter. Okay. Let's say if we say like you are moving in the web pages or in your systems as well, right? From one to you are moving to another one, right? So whenever you move from one folder to another, that's what you are doing. You are trying to change the directory at that point, right? Something like this. If I say like I'm click on this program files, can you see I'm inside program files right now? Correct. So if I click back, I'll be in your local disk C, right? I'm in your local disk C. So I am changing the directory here, right? I am in program files right now. If I want to click on Google, I will be getting inside Google now, right? So this is what we are changing the directories here. Okay. So that's your CD will be helpful to change the directory here at this point. I'll be showing you how. Okay. Everything will be shown to you. Then if you talk about single dot, what does single dot represents, guys? Parent or the present. Single dot, perfect. If you talk about double dot, what is it? Yes, previous. Yeah, you can say parent one as well. So it will be a previous directory. Absolutely right, guys. Then moving on to the ls one, what does ls gives you? List. Absolutely. It will be giving you the list of all those directories or files which are present in that particular directory, right? Then moving on to sudo su. Yeah, sudo su will be, making from, it will be switching your user from a normal user to the root user, guys. If we talk about a root user is the one who has, maximum or the most of the privileges. Okay, when you sign in, you go like a normal user, but when you do sudo su and when you become a root user, you are the one which has most of the privileges in that particular system. If we talk about Windows, in Windows it's a administrator. If we talk about a Linux format, it will be a root. Clear? The one which has most of the privileges. In Windows, you might have seen whenever you are trying to open a folder or something, an application, it asks you that you have to be administrator to run this particular thing, right? So, as a normal user, you have some limited privileges, we can say. You have some boundaries. But if we talk about the root user, it is the one having most or maximum privileges. Clear? Then we have mkdir. What do you understand by mkdir? You are making a directory, or you can say, you are creating a new directory. Then we have touch. What do you understand by touch? You are creating a file with this one, right? Then we talk about cat. Cat is not to copy a file, Mr. Soven. We are here to read the file. It will be, displaying everything which is inside that particular file. Or you can say yes, Mr. Rahul, to see the content. Okay, perfect. Nano, what's a nano? It's like an editor, guys, which is helping you to edit a file. Okay, it's like an editor. PWD is for what? Yes, PW is your present working directory. It will be telling you in which directory you are working right now. Then we have who am I? It tells you who's the current user, right? It tells you the current username. Who is it? Then we have RM. RM is for removing, right? Or delete the files or directories. Perfect. Then we have MV, which is for move. If you're trying to move a file or something like that, right? And then we have CP, which is for copy. Clear with the commands? Like we'll be, I'll be showing you practically, but the syntax clear for this one? Okay, let's try each and every command now. Open this one. Okay, first of all, what I will try to do, I'm just as a normal user with the name Panda here. So I will try to become a root user. So for root user, there was a command. What was it? It was sudo su, right? So as soon as I click on sudo or hit enter, it will be asking for the password. That's the same password. And if you can see the parentheses, it's changed, right? It says you are what? You are a root user now, right? So if I write who am I, it says root. If I write who am I, it says Panda in the new terminal. Clear with this, everyone? I opened a new terminal. In that terminal, I just write who am I when I'm just like, I'm a Panda right now because I haven't done sudo so in this terminal. So it says you are Panda, the user, current login user. And if you talk about in this one, I did the sudo su, I became the root user here. And when I did who am I, it says you are a root user. Yeah, good job, perfect. Moving on to, let's say ls1, we were talking about ls. If I do ls, you can see it shows me all those list of files and directory which is present in your Panda. You can see desktop is there, music, documents, pictures, downloads, public, scripting, which I have created, templates, test, role. These directories are the ones and the files which I have created, right? So just if I want to go to a desktop one, okay, if I want to go to desktop, what I will write, I will just write cd space desktop. Just hit the tab, it will automatically take this thing for you and hit enter. Can you see now? it says you're in desktop now. After Panda, it just added the desktop, correct? So even if I do ls now, can you see these files which is in my desktop? They are listed here, the files in the directories, right? Everyone getting it? What's the use of ls command? Perfect. Moving on to the another one. If I if I want to go back, so if I want to go back, what I will do? So I want to go to the previous directory. Previous directory was what? It was your Panda. So if I want to go back one directory previously, so I will just hit cd space dot dot, and when I did this, you can see it says you're in your Panda now. Clear? To go into desktop, I will just write cd desktop, right? If I do pwd also, it says home Panda desktop. It will give you the whole path of your present working directory, right? And if I want to go back, I will just write cd space dot dot, and it will be taking me to back to the Panda. Clear? And guys, just one more adding on to this one. If you want to clear the whole screen, you can just write clear command, and it will clear the whole screen for you. Okay, perfect. So what we can do, let's say we are creating a new directory with the name bootcamp. Okay, I'm creating a new directory with the name bootcamp, and if I do ls now, can you see bootcamp is here now? This directory just got created, correct? So bootcamp is just created. So let's say if I want to get inside bootcamp, I will just write cd bootcamp, hit enter. Now I'm inside your bootcamp directory, correct? Now if I want to create a file, let's say if I created touch test.txt. First of all, if I show you something inside bootcamp, it's nothing, right? It's totally empty, correct? So if I want to create a file, I will just write touch test.txt. If I hit enter, now if I do ls, can you see a file is present here in this directory, right? Perfect. So if I want to just remove it, I can just write test.txt, rm space test.txt. If I hit enter, if I do ls now, can you see the file is removed? I cannot see anything now, right? Everyone getting this? So I will just do one thing. I will just clear it up. I am inside your bootcamp directory right now. I will just create a file again with the name test2.txt. Okay, hit enter. You can do ls. Test2.txt is present here, right? So now I want to edit this file. I want to write something inside this file. For that, I will just write nano space, give the file name, hit also, hit it. You can see editor opened for you, right? So what you can do now, you can write something like hi, welcome to the bootcamp, right? And for to save, I will just hit Control plus X. Just check at the bottom left, okay? I hit Control plus X. It says save modify buffer. I will just press yes. That is your Y, and hit enter. This file got saved, right? Whatever you have written inside this file, it got saved. If I do ls now, you can see test2.txt is there. Now, if I want to see what is inside this file or to read what is inside that file, we use which command? I have told you. Which one? Cat. Absolutely. So I will just write cat test2.txt. If I hit enter, can you see? It says, hi, welcome to the bootcamp. Is this the same message which we, wrote inside the test2.txt file? Right? Perfect. Just let me clear it up again. So, we have this file inside our bootcamp. Now, if I want to move this file from bootcamp to Panda, okay, what I will do? Correct? Let me just show you in one way, like I can use two commands at a time. So let's say, okay, I wrote move command. My test2.txt was inside bootcamp directory, right? So I will just give the path of that whole thing. Okay, and it was test2.txt, right? So I have this file which is inside bootcamp. Bootcamp is inside your Panda. Panda is inside your home. Okay. So I just gave the file, it took that file from here because I gave the name of it and the whole path. Now, if I see, I am inside your Panda directory now. Okay, I am inside your Panda directory. So what I will do, I will just hit single dot. Single dot represents what? Current directory, right? So what it will do, it will move that file from bootcamp, right? This test2.txt file from bootcamp, it will move that file from your bootcamp to your Panda. So if I hit enter now if I show you ls, can you see test2.txt file is here now, right? Now if I cross check with the bootcamp directory, if I do ls, is that file present here anymore? No, right? Which means we have moved that file. Got it, everyone? Great, great, great. So let me just do one thing. Okay, let me just show you cp command as well. So I will just write cp home p4nd4 and I want to copy that file, right? test2.txt1. So I have that file inside your Panda and now I want to move that into your bootcamp. I want to copy it, not move. I want to copy it into your bootcamp. So I will just hit enter. And now if I do ls, can you see that file inside your bootcamp directory? Yes. And if I do cd dot dot, it takes me to Panda directory. If I do ls, can you see test2.txt file here also? Right, which means we copied that file from that directory to bootcamp, from this directory to the bootcamp one. Clear till this point? So just let me clear it up, and moreover, just one more. If I write history, right, it will be showing you the previous command which you have used. Okay, it will give you the list of all those previous commands which you have used. Okay, because you can see, we just use clear ls cd dot dot ls cp ls cd ls move and these things. We just use these commands, right? So it will be giving you the history of them. Clear? Let me just add it up. Clear is there and your history is there. Okay, we just give you, list of commands used. Okay, perfect. Great. I hope till this point everything is clear. Great. So guys, we'll be talking about scanning now. Let me just go with the PPT first, then I'll be showing you, in the practical as well. Okay. Moving on with the scanning. What do you guys understand by the scanning basically? So scanning, in short, it refers to the set of procedures used for, identifying hosts, ports, and services in a network, right? So you can say it's one of the components of intelligence gathering, which can be used by a pen tester or an attacker to create a profile of the target organization. So if you talk about the objectives of a scanning, it's like, discover live host, IP addresses, any open port of live host, correct? Like what are the operating systems and what's the system architecture, what all services are running on that host, and discovering vulnerabilities in live host, correct? That's what your scanning does. So moving on to the scanning one, what we are trying to do is, we are trying to gather the live host here, right? We are actively connected to the system and we are trying to get a response to identify open ports and the services here, right? Then what we do, we have discovery scan, like, nmap-sn is there, and we are just mentioning the IP and whole range of it. So it will be doing what? You can see it's a least intrusive scan, like a ping sweep. So it is used to create a network map to show connected device in the architecture. Okay, it will be showing you all those IPs which are, connected in that architecture, or those which are live right now, doesn't it? You can see number of IPs are being listed here, right? Then we have, types of scan. This is like a full scan. It will be giving you a complete in-depth scan, including port, their services and vulnerabilities, which is easy to see in network traffic when performed. Okay, so it will be giving you whole details and the in-depth scanning reports in your full scan. Then we have your stealth scan as well, right? Stealth scan is what? So if you can see, it conducts scan by sending a SYN packet and then analyzing the response. If SYNAC is received, guys, the normal handshake, three-way handshake, it is used to what? It is used to conduct our communication, right? So before starting a conversation or communication, you always do a three-way handshake. In three-way handshake, we have SYN, SYNAC, and ACK, right? First you send SYN, then you get SYN and acknowledgement return, and then you send the acknowledgement back. That's a three-way handshake format. But when you do stealth scan, it's a halfway process, you can say, right? Or a half connect scan. So you do SYN, you get SYNACK, okay? And then since you got the SYNACK, it's not of any use because you know that particular port is open, right? See, if you are sending a SYN, guys, okay, if the port is open, if you are sending SYN, the port will send you SYNACK. SYN is the genuine way to start the communication. So if the port is open, you send SYN, it will be sending you SYNACK back. Okay, it's absolutely appropriate, sorry. See, guys, if we talk about a normal scenario, if we talk about a three-way handshake, okay, if we talk about three-way handshake, it's like what? If there is a A, right, and there is a B user, so these are the two systems, they are trying to interact. You know, you do a three-way handshake. First you send SYN, then you get SYNACK. Apologies for this, I'm just writing it here. Then you write SYNACK. And in response to that SYNACK, you do what? You send an acknowledgement. This is a general three-way handshake format, right? This is what happens, correct? Perfect. So this is a three-way handshake. Now what happens if you're talking about stealth scan, right? See guys, if you want to determine whether the port is open or not, okay, if you want to determine whether the port is open or not, taking the same scenario into consideration, the three-way handshake one. See, I send SYN first, right? RST reset. We are abruptly closing the connection here. So guys, getting back to this, see, if I'm trying to determine whether the port is open or not, okay, if I'm trying to send SYN, if the port is open, because SYN is the genuine way to start the communication, right? If I'm sending SYN, I am getting what? I am getting SYNACK in return. Am I right? If the port is open, I am sending SYN, I will be getting a SYNACK, right? Correct? Clear till this point, everyone? Now, since I'm getting a SYNACK in return, like now do we know which port is open or that port is open or not? Because we are getting a SYNACK, right? It means that port is open, correct? Right? Perfect. Since we got to know the port is open now, do we really need to send acknowledgement back? Because let's say if there is any kind of a, you know, inline defense setup there, right? Or, you know, moreover, what can they do? If you're sending acknowledgement back, they will do what? They will just log you, right? Just get logged in. Am I right? Correct? Perfect. So we just got logged in. So what we need to do if you want to determine the, you know, open ports. So I won't send the acknowledgement back. I will just send reset to just abruptly close that connection. Okay. That's the whole process for it. Cool. That's why we do stealth scan. All right. Perfect. So moving on to this one, you know, regarding scanning also, we have one more, Nessus. I guess you might have heard about this. This is a vulnerability scanner, right? So it is given by your Tenables, right? It's a Tenables vulnerability scanner. What you can do, you know, you can scan for the vulnerabilities with this tool, the Nessus one. You just have to mention the IP in this one. As soon as you mention the IPs, it will start automatically running. You know, you have to, you know, basically set up the settings here, like what all ports you want to scan, what sort of a scanning do you want to do, would it be a credential based scan or not, you know, many more options are there when you do regarding your Nessus. So when you set up each and everything, like, you know, you will be giving the range of the ports as well, like how many ports you want to access or like scan, right? Yes, Sanjay, that it is. But if you want to go, you know, there are limitations for the open, like for the free version, there is a limitation. You have, if you want to more features or something like that, you have to pay for it. Perfect. So it's a vulnerability scanner, guys. So you mentioned the IP, you set up everything there. Even if you want to set up a policy, you can, you know, set up a policy as well, right? So after setting up all the configuration and settings, you know, you hit the launch button and it will start scanning for you automatically, and it will start revealing all those vulnerabilities for you and that particular scanning. Got it? If you can see, you know, results, these vulnerabilities are also mentioned in this area, right? And it gives you more details, like what's the CV, what's the CVSS score as well, how severe this vulnerability might be, and all those bits. Correct? Can you see? CVSS is also mentioned here, 6, something like that, right? Clear? Perfect. That's the usage of your this Nessus one. All right. Moving on to the scanning part. Now, let me just show you some practicals of it. Just clear this up. Let me just launch another machine, which is a Metasploitable 2. So we were talking about scanning, guys. Basically, scanning, it works in 3 steps. Like, you can check whether the host is live or not with the scanning part. You can check open ports, and you can check the running services as well, right? For checking the host live or not, you always ping it, isn't it? Ping is there, traceroute is there, traceroute is there. For check open ports, we will be using Nmap, right? And for running services also, we'll be using Nmap for that matter. All right. Let me just show you a few bits of it. I was just running the Metasploitable machine right here. All right. So now, moreover, what I want you guys, okay, few of you guys are already experienced in this one. As I mentioned in the Linux command, if you want to see the IP of your machine, you have to write what? You have to write fconfig, right? If I hit fconfig, can you see the IP mentioned here? Perfect. So I was saying, guys, we did fconfig and I got my IP here. Okay. So I just copied my IP. For copying it, you can just have a shortcut which is Control plus Shift plus C. Okay, that's a shortcut for this one. All right. So there are few steps in which your Nmap actually works. It does a ping sweep. It looks out for the DNS lookup. Okay. It has those reverse DNS lookup as well. Then it checks for the open ports, and it also runs your NSE script, which is our Nmap script engine. Okay. So let's check out few things here regarding the scanning part. So here I just did if config, I got my IP. Okay, cool. Then I want to determine what's the IP of Metasploitable, what I can use. Have you guys heard about AppScan? It will be mapping IP to the MAC address, and moreover, if you are trying to use AppScan in an internal network, guys, it will be showing you a list of all those IPs which are also in your system architecture or in that range. Correct? So I just mentioned IP. I will just giving the whole range here, .0/24. So it will be checking the whole range of 192.168.107. /24 determines, the subnet mask, you can say, the CADR notation. It's like 255.255.255, talking about the class C one. So it will be doing what? It will be checking the whole range of this one, like 192.168.107.1, .2, .3 till your .255. Getting my point? Perfect. So what it will be doing, just to tell you again, see, my IP was 192.168.107, right? Yeah, 107 dot something whatsoever was there. Correct. So what I am trying to do, I am trying to see all those machines which are up in the same network. So this is a class C1 192, right? So I did what? 0/24. So it will be doing what? It will be checking the whole range for you, like 107.1.2.3.4.5 till your 255. Make sense? Like this is the whole agent of doing this thing. Okay. I hope everyone got it. Perfect. Moving on with the AppScan. If I hit enter here, okay, if I hit enter at this point, tell me what is happening now. Did I get list of IPs here, right? So guys, one is my default gateway here, one is my network ID, and one determines my broadcast IP. The left one is the Metasploitables IP here. Okay, this is how to figure out in your AppScan tool. Now if I copy this one, okay, because that's my target one, right? I'm just copying this IP right now. We'll just hit the clear command. Now what I am trying to do, I am trying to scan this particular Metasploitable IP. For that I will just use nmap command, and I will just write -v and just paste the IP of my Metasploitable. Correct? So anyone who knows what does this hyphen V stands for? The small one, verbosity, right? So it will be giving you more details here, okay, regarding the scanning. So if I hit enter on this one, okay, it gave me a pretty good result, right? So you can see, perfect. So it discovered open ports. It's initiated hopping scan, scanning this one, completed hopping scan, initiating parallel DNS resolution, which we talked about, right? Like DNS lookup thing in which your Nmap works, right? And it did what? It initiated a stealth scan for you. So by default, always remember, by default, your Nmap runs stealth scan. Okay? By default, it runs your stealth scan. And if you look closely, how many ports did it scan for you in that metasploitable machine? So it scanned 1,000 ports for you, right? So by default, guys, always remember your stealth scan will scan 1,000 well-known ports for you. Okay, it will scan 1,000 well-known ports for you. If you want to scan all the ports, you have to mention what? You have to mention nmap -p and it will be scanning all those, all the ports for you. Clear till this part, everyone? Great. So by default, always remember it does your stealth scan, right? And if you want to go with all the ports, it will scan your, with the -p you can scan all the ports right here. It will take its time, okay? Because since we are talking about all the ports. So how many ports are there, guys? 65535. Okay. Guys, since you are talking about the range is from 0 to 65535, which makes it a total of what? Right? So if we talk about range, in total it will be your 65536 if you include 0 also. Okay? That's the tricky one. Clear? So that's the whole range of your port for that matter. Yeah. Okay. So you can also see here, if I just scroll it up, can you see it scan 65505 close port, because I haven't mentioned the verbose part. That's why it is not showing the total number of ports right away. But if you can see 65505 are the closed ports. But if you calculate them, they will be your 13 total. By default, your Nmap will be scanning 65535 ports. It won't include your 01. If you want to include 0, you have to mention the range. To mention the range, you have to do what? You just have to write -p and 0-65535, and it will be scanning the whole range for you. Clear? Perfect. And by default, what happens, guys, by default, your this Nmap have scripts, which we saw the NSE one, right? Which I was talking about, Nmap script engine. So we have by default many scripts, around 600 in your Nmaps, which you can utilize as well. Okay. To find them, you just have to write locate nmap/scripts. It will give you a pretty good list. Can you see this? These are the many lists which are by default present in your Nmap. All right. And now just to show you that grep command which you're talking about, and not the grep, just to show you one more. If I do wc, it is to do the counting of all these lines. If I do wc-l, can you see the number displayed here? Right? And that number determines what? 600. And that number determines what, guys? Number of scripts within your Nmap by default, right? Perfect. So many more are there, just to show you, regarding this versions as well. If I just show you again, if I just show you that thing again, that command which we used, this one. Okay. Let me just remove this part. So if you can see, we just remove the verbose, so it won't give you much of our details. So you can see we got port, we got state, it's open, and we got the service. Can you see the very first one, which is FTP? Right? So I'm not getting the version of this. I just know what is the service here. So I need to know what is the version used by them. So we can also use the nmap, command for that. For that, we have to just write nmap-s capital V. Okay, it will be giving you the service version, and just have to mention the IP of my metasploitable machine. If I hit enter now, it will be giving me the versions as well. you will just see the difference. Let it, take it time to the processing, because scripts are running to gather the more information, to gather the versions of these open ports. Cool. We got the hit. Can you see now after writing -sv, which is for your versions, can you see it says port, state, service, and now we can see the versions as well. Make sense, everyone? So, moreover, moving on to this, there's one more. Just I wanted to show you -sc. So, anyone who knows what this -sc does? So -sc will be running your well-known scripts for you. Okay. So if I hit enter, it will be running those scripts. See, earlier we discovered those 600 number of scripts, right? Correct. Earlier we discovered by locate command that there were 600 of scripts by default present in your nmap, right? Correct. But with this -sc, we won't be running all those scripts, right? We'll be just running the well-known ones. Okay, we'll be running among those 600. We'll be running the well-known scripts. Perfect. We got the hit now. All right. It's taking its time, though it's taking a lot of time. Okay. What I can do just to show you regarding one particular port. Okay. 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 We got the hit there. Perfect. Give us a pretty good list. So when I did -sc, you can see now we got the port, state, service, and can you see it gave me more hits? It ran these scripts for me, FTP NN and FTP sys, right? Isn't it? So even if I open the terminal, grep FTP. See what I did now. I did locate nmap/scripts. Till this point, it was giving me, all those number of lists. Correct? It was showing you all those lists which we previously saw. Right? All that pretty big list. Okay, I have cleared that one. But remember the last time which we were using locate nmap script, it gave me a pretty big list regarding the scripts mentioned in this one. Right? Those 600 ones. What I did now, I just piped it down and I wrote grep FTP. With grep FTP, what happened? It is grabbing all those scripts which only the FTP ones. Those scripts which have FTP written in it, it will just grabbing those scripts for me. Okay, from them it gave me these many. Okay, and if you can see here, right, FTP sys and FTP NN is present here. And can you see FTP NN and FTP sys is also present here? So now can you relate what I was trying to say? With -sc, it will be running your well-known scripts. Getting my point? Perfect. And moreover, if you can see, it says for FTP anonymous FTP login allowed, which means you can enter into this version with the name anonymous and password as well. So I will just write FTP and hit the IP of Metasploitable machine. If I hit enter now, it says name. I will just write anonymous. It asks password. I can type it empty, or I can just write anonymous again. It won't show you though. But now, can you see it says FTP here, and it says login successful. Clear till this point? Great. So we successfully exploited service running on your port 21 of your Metasploitable. Now let's try to exploit the particular version as well. So if you remember, let me just exit it out first. Yeah, just not clear it up. Let me just show you this thing. Okay, since we were talking about FTP only, right now, so I showed you version as well. It says JSFTPD 2.3.4, right? So guys, we have this pretty cool utility in your machine, in your Parrot or in your Kali, which goes by the name MSF console. Okay, you have this pretty good utility which goes by the name Metasploit. To open that Metasploit framework, just have to write MSF console. If you hit enter, it will take a time to load everything, right? It will be just opening its banner and everything for that matter. So it will just take few minutes here. So it's starting the Metasploit framework console, you can see. So we have, plenty of guys exploits, payloads, and everything mentioned here, which you can use to exploit a machine. Okay, these can be very useful for you. Okay, to help in doing a exploit to take an advantage of a vulnerability present in another machine. Okay, clear? So in this, what we will do, we will trying to exploit the version of that FTP in your Metasploitable machine. So now what I will do, I will just, first of all, moreover, what I'm targeting, I'm trying to search for an exploit which is regarding that particular version with the name VSF TPD. So I'm trying to search for it. If I hit enter, we are lucky enough that we got just one single hit, which is regarding VSF TPD 234 backdoor. Can you see in the description it says VSF TPD version 2.3.4 and it says backdoor command execution. Is this the same version of the FTP which we discovered before while doing nmap-sv with the service version, right? Great. So what I will do, I will try to use this exploit. To use this exploit, you just have to write use. Okay. Either you can mention this index number, which is 0, or else you can copy this whole thing and just paste it after use. So I will just go with the easy way around. I will just mention 0. Can you did you notice this prompt change and it says exploit using Unix FTP VSF TPD 234 backdoor? This one is it's using this exploit. Can you see that? My prompt change here, right? Correct? I'm using this exploit now. So what I will do, guys, I will just write show options. Okay, in show options, you can see the R host is mentioned here. Okay, payload is already mentioned, automatically taken by itself. R host is mentioned empty right now. Okay, R port is 21. R host is what? It's a target host, which means I have to mention the IP of my Metasploitable machine, to get the remote host of that one. Yeah, R host is the remote host here. So it's a target host. So you have to mention the IP of your target. So what I will do, I will just set it up. So to set it, you just have to write set R host, mention the IP. If I hit enter now, if I do show options again, can you see R host is set up now? Right? We just set up our host. Perfect. Now all I need to do is I need to just write exploit. If I hit enter, you can see, we got the shell access. It says session 1 open, everything is successful. Backdoor service has been spawned. UID equals to 0, GID equals to 0. 0 represents your root. So if I write fconfig, oh, okay, so it took it. I'll just write it again. Yeah, perfect. Can you see the IP mentioned here? Now, can you guys tell me whose IP is this? Metasploitable IP, my target's IP. So can I say I'm inside and I own the command shell into my remote machine, which is Metasploitable? So in short, can I say I'm inside my Metasploitable machine now? Right? Perfect. So even guys, you can write uname -a to check, displays everything. It says Linux Metasploitable. Right? It says Metasploitable, which is I'm in Metasploitable machine. Right? If I go to ls, it is giving me all those files which is inside your Metasploitable machine. Clear with this? Great. So this is how you exploit a host and take the advantage of a vulnerability. Got it? Okay, moving on to back to the presentation, guys. So what we have to do is we have to do the last part, which is your remote writing, isn't it? Report writing, correct? So any guesses, what do we do in report writing? Report vulnerability, which tool we use, all things we found, which vulnerability found, report to the authorized person, apps. Right? So moving on with this one, we say is the normalization of data. What do you understand by normalization of data? All the data which you discovered, right? Like your team will be there. They are collecting a lot of data during the test, right? So you will be doing like you will mention each tools, obviously your tools which you have used, they will also collect and store data differently, right? So all that data must be aggregated combine, like, combine several separate elements. They should be normalized and correlated in order, to make sense. So you'll be combining data for multiple sources and in different formats into a common and consistent event format. That's our normalization of data, right? Then we have written report of findings. You'll be giving a summary of each and everything, executive summary. You'll be mentioning all those methodology at this point. Then you'll be finding, you'll be mentioning all those findings and remediation. What's all remedy, or vulnerabilities which you found, and remediation for all that things will be mentioning at this point. Like, you'll be mentioning all those risks, you know, correct? You'll be mentioning all those vulnerabilities which you found. You'll be, number of risks which you have found. You will be calculating them. You'll be analyzing them, and you'll be giving the conclusion in your report part. Okay. So you will be writing all those report findings in this part. Clear? Then we have handling. What do you understand by handling? See, let's just talking about the report thing, right? See, data from the assessment should always be handled with due diligence and care. Okay, because your findings and your recommendations are very sensitive in nature, and it should be treated as confidential part, right? So that's why these all things should be handled with care. Okay, then you have to mention all those mitigation strategies at this point, in your report. Or it should contain all those, not just finding but recommendation of how to mitigate a vulnerability as well. So as I was saying, you don't have to report all those findings, and everything. You have to recommend the mitigations for them as well, for all those vulnerabilities which you have encountered, right? Let's say if there is any, a weak password or something like that, right? So you have to mention the mitigation for that matter. Let's say, if you have found a weak password complexity, if it was easy to crack, you can put up a, you can set up mitigation for that. You have to mention the mitigation for them as well. Like, minimum password requirement should be there. Like, these filters should be there. Like, be at least 10 characters of a password. It should contain uppercase, lowercase, special characters should be mentioned there, and no repeating characters should be there. Or, like, you cannot use previous 10 passwords for that matter. Getting my point? Right? Perfect. And if you found any plain text format, in plain text format, password, what I mean is, like, in this, all passwords should be stored as hashes or another encrypted format in your database. Okay, you should not, store those passwords in a plain text format, because that's pretty easy and readable, right? So it should be encrypted for more security. It should be, stored as hashes. Okay, like, those who are from the developer field, they might also vouch for it, that whenever you are trying to save the password entered by the user or something, while they are registering, you always mention something that, this password should be converted into this particular hash and then stored in the database, right? And you can also mention, guys, if there is no multi-factor authentication, so you have to mention the multi-factor authentication as well. Remember, which we said, something something you are, something you do, or something you have. Correct? Multi-factor authentication can make your system and your network more secure, right? Clear with this? And moreover, like, if you found any unnecessary port open, obviously that's a risk, right? That's like a, an attacker can take an advantage out of it, right? So system hardening should be there. You have to secure your computer, your server, by reducing its attack surface, right? So disable unneeded services, close unused ports, uninstall unused program, right? So you have to mention all these things while doing a report. Clear? Perfect. So, guys, like, after report, you have to do what, you can, let's say, you have created some shells, you might have used tools, you might, you have created credentials as well. So you can say, like, it's a post engagement cleanup technique. So you have to clean up those things as well. You cannot leave these things over there. Okay. Right? Because whenever you are doing pen testing, you always create these things, right? So you have to do a cleanup of that thing as well. And you have to mention, attest all those findings which we were discussing before. You have to provide evidence of your findings to the client. You provide them detailed reports, explanations, and ensure they understand the risk involved in it. You have to place all those screenshot for that matter, and everything you have to display over there, right? And at last, there will be one, you can say post reporting technique or post report writing. There's one thing which happens is your client acceptance. That does the client agree you have fulfilled the scope of work? And if you're talking about client acceptance, as I was saying, does the client agree you have fulfilled the scope of work or not? You know, so you have to, check out these things as a post report writing. See everyone with this part? All right. So that's it, guys. That's it in your reporting part. I hope everything is clear till this point. Thank you, everyone.